One of the world's leading thinkers on international politics, Joseph Nye, has said that Turkey has less soft power than it did a few years ago, noting that a thriving economy and democratic governance were ingredients of the country's soft power. Harvard University's distinguished service professor Nye is a political scientist who coined the concept soft power, a kind of power that has the ability to attract rather than coerce, and that has been widely used by Turkish decision-makers to highlight the country's appeal as a modern Muslim democracy. Nye is despondent over Turkey's current direction and believes that cracking down on dissent has a negative impact on Turkey's most significant weapon, soft power. Not long ago, Turkey was touted as an ideal example for post-revolution Arab nations, but is now famed for images of harsh police crackdowns on protesters and the arrest of critical journalists, epitomizing the turn the Justice and Development Party, AK Party, government has made in its third term. Until recently, Turkish soap operas dominated Arab televisions across the Middle East, and the country's standing as the Muslim world's most modern and prosperous nation had appealed to Muslims globally. The Arab Spring offered ample opportunity for Turkey to reassert its influence in its own backyard, but Ankara wasted that chance when it misread the wave of discontent among the people and anticipated that the fall of decrepit leaders across the Middle East would be easier and bring about an era of democratic transformation that would also benefit Turkey. As the Arab Spring turned into widespread violence and bloodshed, anti-government demonstrations linked to Gezi Park in Istanbul's famed Taksim Square in the summer of 2013 set in motion a series of events that curbed Turkey's hard-won democracy. Freedoms were restricted, journalists intimidated, and the judiciary was put under executive control. Turkish authorities briefly shut down Twitter and YouTube and endorsed a series of draconian security bills that effectively restricted freedom of assembly. Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said this week that unauthorized protests won't be tolerated for even a minute. A lot of us had very high hopes for President Recep Tayyip Erdogan as a democratic leader, Nye told Today's Zaman in an interview. Turkey's powerful president made it no secret that he wants the new parliament to grant him more executive powers, while his critics are now alarmed that he will enshrine a kind of order that is no different from typical Middle Eastern regimes. The Harvard professor said Turkey is not as democratic as it was 5 or 6 years ago, although there is still a degree of democracy in the country due to recurring elections. But I think the freedom of the press and freedom of dissent are very important parts of democracy, Nye stressed. The government had the public's support when it introduced a reform agenda to curb the role of the military in politics and ameliorate the bureaucracy in line with Western standards in the hope that it would boost checks and balances and hold authorities accountable. But while the incumbent government reached its third term in power in 2011, it showed no signs of attrition. Its much-vaunted reform agenda was thrown into disarray and ran out of steam. As years of government-backed trials buried the clout of the once powerful military and eliminated hostile members of the judiciary, the appetite for further reforms dimmed. Nye thinks that the shift of the military's power in Turkish politics makes some difference in terms of U.S. relations with Turkey, as dialogue was mostly conducted between the respective militaries in the past. But he also blamed Erdogan for setting a different direction for Turkey. He added that U.S. President Barack Obama was initially very favorable to the direction Erdogan had set. The feeling was that Turkey would be a democracy, Nye said, adding that it displayed evidence that Islam and democracy were compatible. However, according to Nye, some people have begun to wonder whether that is still true. Nye is known for his extensive work on U.S. power on the world stage, mostly leveling criticisms at those who claim the U.S. is on the decline. His latest book, which he said could be read in just a few hours, deals with this question. His book is The American Century Over, summarizes the ideas he has had on the issue over the last 20 years. He began his work on this track in 1990, when he wrote Bound to Lead, which argued that the U.S. was not in decline. He said the U.S. frequently goes through cycles where arguments are made that the U.S. is on the decline, and the 2008 financial recession was a major impetus to push forward that idea. He believes that sometimes Americans exaggerate the amount of leverage the U.S. had on other nations during the Cold War, and says the U.S. may have somewhat less leverage on Turkey today than it had in the past because Ankara has become more independent in terms of foreign policy than it was during the Cold War. For over 2 decades, Nye has promoted the idea that the US is here to stay and that it has no genuine global competitor at the moment. However, he is mostly known for the soft power concept he developed. He considers nations to have 3 dimensions of power: economic, military, and soft power. Nye claimed that Turkey has less soft power today than it had a few years ago and that curbing journalists and imprisoning people who dissent has a negative impact on this power. On the economic front, Turkey is also doing poorly. The latest economic indicators point to ominous signs as the local currency hit record lows against the US dollar this week. Industrial production is slowing down, the Consumer Confidence Index has seen the lowest figure in the last 6 years, and economists warn that Turkey is stuck in the so-called middle-income trap. Nye noted that it would help if the Turkish economy recovers, but also if Turkey has the policy it had a few years ago when it was seen as a state ruled by an Islamist party that was democratic and which had a thriving economy. That gave Turkey a good deal of soft power, Nye added. Nye recalled then Foreign Minister Davutoglu's earlier remarks, saying Turkey had leverage because it was pivoting between the Middle East and Europe and that role gave it special and extra influence. He said the problems in the Middle East today somewhat undercut that.